Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
Jorgina was laying naked in bed, gazing at the ceiling. Her body was lightly covered by a sheet, and a faint smile graced her lips. She felt calm and content with life, and it made her want to shout it to the world. However, she restrained herself because her husband never approved of excessive emotions. He was always irritated when she displayed her emotions too fervently, be it joy, annoyance, amusement, or anger. She was trying to contain her emotions now as well. They had just made love, and Jorgina had once again felt how much she loved her husband. It always happened that way when they reached the bedroom. Well, what could she do? She was emotional and affectionate like that. Jorgina turned her head to the side and looked at her husband, Melanio. He absentmindedly was touching the hair on his chest and was looking at the painting hanging opposite the bed. He was examining it, lost in his own thoughts. "What are you thinking about, my love?" Jorgina tenderly asked. Melanio raised an eyebrow and made an indistinct gesture with his lips. "Oh, nothing in particular," he absent-mindedly replied. But Jorgina could see that there were thoughts plaguing his mind, thoughts that wouldn't leave him in peace. She turned her whole body towards him, clung to him closer, and rested her head on his chest. "No, I can tell you're thinking about something." "Tell me," she urged. Melanio sighed. Since she persisted, he wouldn't relent until he said something. He briefly glanced at his wife and once again fixed his gaze on the painting. Then he slowly spoke. "I think we need a bigger apartment." Jorgina immediately sat up and looked into her husband's eyes. She was surprised because they had discussed this topic about a year ago, but Melanio had been against it. Why would they need another apartment if their current one was perfectly fine? Of course, Jorgina had hinted that it was time for them to have children, but her husband wasn't ready yet. "Do you really want this?" "Melanio, are you serious?" Jorgina asked hopefully. Melanio shrugged slightly. "I'm not a fool. I understand everything. And yes, I think it's time to consider expanding our living space since we're planning such changes. But I'll tell you right away, until we resolve the apartment issue, please don't torment me with talking about children, I'm begging you. You can be so nagging that it's hard for me to hold back." Jorgina embraced her husband tightly and kissed him multiple times. No, I promise, no talking about children. I'm serious. Everything can wait, we'll discuss it later." "Oh, God, I can barely contain myself. I'm so happy." "And you? Are you happy?" Melanio sighed, smiled faintly. Jorgina was struggling to contain her emotions. It was so noticeable. If Melanio allowed her right now, she would scream throughout the house, jump, bounce on the bed, and squeal with joy. But he intentionally didn't give her permission. He enjoyed having control over her. He felt like a very important person in her life since she listened to him. He kissed her on the top of her head and replied, "Yes, I'm happy. Let's sleep. We'll discuss everything later. We'll discuss and make a plan of action on the weekend. Good night, my dear." Jorgina frowned slightly when she heard his words. She should have been waiting for a whole week to discuss everything. Was he joking? She was ready to discuss it all night long, and he was making her wait a whole week. Jorgina knew that if he said so, he wouldn't even talk to her about the apartment all week. Maybe he was doing it on purpose to make her suffer? Well, yes, most likely he wanted to demonstrate his power over her in this way. But Jorgina didn't hold it against him. She loved him too much to pay attention to such trivial matters. After all, he loved her, and they had been together for so many years. That was the most important thing. Their feelings had been tested by time over the years, and nothing could separate them. They would always be together. Melanio turned away from her and began to fall asleep, while Jorgina looked at the painting and thought about the past. How long ago it was, and yet it seemed like just a couple of years had passed. They met when Jorgina was 17 years old. Melanio was 5 years older than her, having just graduated from university while she had just finished school. Melanio was an adult to her, already having a job. And she was a naive girl wearing rose-colored glasses, dreaming of a prince on a white horse. And he became her prince. Oh, how envious her friends were when Melanio started courting her. He didn't behave like their peers who could barely hold a conversation. He invited her to restaurants, drove her in his car, and gave her expensive gifts. He was a bit reserved, and Jorgina always had to keep her emotions in check. She admired him. She fell in love with him instantly. They dated for about a year, and then Melanio proposed to her. By that time, she had already turned 18 and started university. For her 18th birthday, he gave her an expensive diamond ring and organized a lavish dinner at a restaurant. All her friends were burning with envy because Jorgina managed to snatch such a guy who was willing to get the moon for her. They got married soon. The wedding was modest because Melanio didn't want to spend a lot of money on a meaningless celebration with a bunch of relatives and friends. After the ceremony, they went on a honeymoon trip to Europe. Jorgina was overjoyed. She had never even left the city, and now it was Europe. She considered herself lucky. She not only married for love, but also secured a good future for herself. They bought an apartment, splitting the amount of money that should have been paid equally. Jorgina's parents helped, and Melanio contributed half of the amount. It was the money he inherited from his grandmother. Jorgina's parents had to sell their apartment. They bought a one-bedroom place for themselves and gave the remaining money to their daughter. Jorgina was against it, but her parents made that decision. The girl graduated from university and got a good job. Now she was making almost as much as her husband, and they could think about having children. But Melanio postponed that matter. He said they weren't ready yet. Children were a huge responsibility, and they needed to carefully consider all issues. And then her parents died. Her mother fell seriously ill. She had a cancer. The doctors said it would take only 6 months before her death. There was nothing anyone could do to help her. Her father couldn't bear the grief. 3 months after her mother's death, he had a heart attack and passed away. Jorgina struggled with the sorrow, and only thanks to her husband could she endure such a terrible blow of fate. Deprived of both parents, she became even more attached to her husband. He was now her only support and strength. She had no one else. Melanio had become her only close relative. There was also her cousin sister, Olivia, but she lived in another city. In their childhood, Olivia would often come to visit them during vacations. The girls were friends when they were children, but life eventually put them on different sides. They exchanged holiday greetings and birthday wishes, but their communication stopped there. Jorgina sold the apartment she inherited from her parents and deposited the money in the bank. Over time, the funds accumulated interest, and a considerable sum had been saved. If Melanio contributed a little more, they would have enough to buy a large 3-bedroom or even a 4-bedroom apartment after selling their small 2-bedroom apartment. And then they would be able to have a child. Oh, she would be able to become a mother. Jorgina even shed a tear. She gently caressed her flat stomach and smiled. She couldn't wait for it to happen. She was already 30 years old, the perfect time to have a child. She was already slightly late, but life circumstances had conspired against her. But now she could dream about the future with a calm heart. If Melanio initiated this conversation, it meant he was ready for change too. Jorgina closed her eyes and sighed. She began to drift off to sleep, and throughout the night, she had strange dreams. She dreamed of children, many children. They all reached out to her, pleading for her to take them. And Jorgina wanted to take them all, but as soon as she reached out, all the children disappeared, and she found herself in complete darkness. She couldn't see anything in front of her. She walked, bumping into walls, for a very long time until she realized she was locked in a small room. She found a door, but it was tightly shut. No matter how much Jorgina knocked and cried for help, no one came to her aid. So, she remained alone in complete darkness. And then she screamed and woke up. The unpleasant residue of the strange dream troubled her until almost morning, but by morning, all memories of the nightmare had vanished. Several days passed. It was Friday. In the morning, Jorgina discovered that she had a flat tire. She took a taxi to work. And after work, she wanted to come to her favorite pastry shop, where she always bought cakes and pastries. She wanted to buy Melanio his favorite cupcake to surprise him. The shop was not close by, but she felt like taking a walk. The weather outside was beautiful, and Jorgina was in a great mood. Today, they could talk about their plans. They could discuss buying a new home and plan their next steps. And Jorgina wanted to ask her husband about having a child. He would probably get annoyed that she was asking about everything in advance, but she didn't care. She was already 30 years old. She was no longer a young girl, and she needed to know what would happen next and what they could expect. Jorgina had been walking for about 20 minutes. She turned into an alley that would shorten her route slightly. Here, there were only private houses and no high-rise buildings. She loved this street. It was always quiet, with hardly any cars. And the houses were so beautiful, although not new. When she walked here, it felt like she had stepped into the past. She wanted one of these houses to belong to her. It seemed like the air on this street was different. It was cleaner, fresher. She took a deep breath and smiled. Yes, it would be great if they bought a house instead of an apartment. They would create a cozy backyard where they could sit in the evenings, talk, and enjoy peace and quiet. And after Jorgina gave birth to their child, she would constantly be outside, walking with the baby near the house. And then Melanio would build a playground and sandbox for their child so that the little one could play as much as they wanted. How beautiful it would be! Jorgina walked slowly down the street, dreaming about the future. Eventually, she stopped near a particular house. Most likely, no one lived there because it looked abandoned. However, that was the kind of house Jorgina dreamed of. Big, majestic, with large windows. Yes, it wasn't new, but no less attractive because of that. Jorgina examined it for a few minutes, then snapped out of her reverie. If someone saw her, there would be questions. She appeared suspicious, standing and staring at other people's houses, like a criminal plotting something bad. Jorgina quickly looked around. Thank goodness, there was no one on the street. Nobody noticed her strange behavior. Jorgina chuckled, satisfied that no one had seen her, and continued walking leisurely. She reached the intersection. There were no traffic lights, but there was a pedestrian crossing. Apparently, there wasn't enough traffic here to warrant installing traffic lights. The pedestrian crossing was sufficient. Jorgina glanced around. During the entire time she had been walking here, she hadn't seen a single car. Yes, it was indeed very quiet and peaceful. Jorgina considered it the best neighborhood to live in. The girl, all in her thoughts, smiled, once again dreaming of buying a house on this street, and then she stepped onto the road to cross to the other side. And then she heard screeching brakes. From that moment, the times flowed so slowly, like viscous honey. At first, Jorgina didn't understand where the sound was coming from. Then she realized it was very close to her. Frozen in place, having reached the middle of the road, she turned her head to the left. The last thing she saw was a bright yellow car very close to her. She even managed to make out the woman behind the wheel. She had a terrified look and red hair. Her eyes and mouth widened, presumably she was screaming, but Jorgina couldn't hear her voice. The only thing she could hear was the unpleasant sound of the braking car. And then suddenly, she felt a sharp pain. She didn't understand what had happened or where the pain came from because she immediately sank into darkness. She didn't even have time to scream in surprise and fear. Before losing consciousness, she thought about how suddenly she felt so melancholic and scared, as if everything she loved and cherished had vanished from her life. Perhaps that's how it always happens before death. And then she blacked out. And what should we do next? What do you suggest? We can't just leave everything as it is. We need to take some action. Jorgina heard her husband's voice, but it sounded as if her ears were stuffed with cotton. She felt so unwell that she didn't even want to open her eyes. She wanted everyone to leave, to let her be in silence. She wanted to sleep, rest, and lie down. She wanted them to leave her alone. She hadn't slept well at all. She should tell Melanio to go to another room and talk on the phone there. But her tongue didn't want to obey her either. I can't do anything. I've already told you. I suggest you accept this fact. If you keep making noise and causing a scene, I'll have to arrange for you to be kicked out of here. Stop yelling at me. I'm just doing my job, and it's not part of my job to tolerate such disrespect towards me, Jorgina heard a stranger's voice say. She felt like she could hear better now, as if the cotton from her ears had suddenly disappeared. She frowned and pondered. She hadn't heard this voice before. What was happening? Was she sick and Melanio called a doctor? Why was all her whole body aching? Why didn't she have the strength to even open her eyes? What was going on? Without opening her eyes, she raised her hand to touch her lips. It seemed to her that they were so dry that she couldn't speak. As soon as she did that, she heard. She's awake. Jorgina, can you hear me? Say that you hear me. It's me, Melanio. It's Jorgina. Jorgina realized that her lips weren't as dry as she thought, but she couldn't speak loudly at first. I can hear you perfectly. I just can't speak loudly. Why do I feel so bad? Am I sick? Do I have tonsillitis? I can't think clearly, Jorgina whispered. She felt Melanio take her hand. You had an accident, my dear, he said gently. And then Jorgina remembered abruptly. An instant flash in her brain, and she remembered how a car crashed into her on the pedestrian crossing. It was yesterday or maybe a couple of days ago. She couldn't tell how much time had passed. She opened her eyes abruptly. But it was still pitch dark around her. What's happening? Why is it so dark? Did you turn off the lights? She said softly. There was silence in response. Jorgina suddenly felt a looming sense of trouble. She repeated, Melanio, what's happening? Why is it so dark? What's going on? Don't be silent, you're scaring me. Where am I? Why is it dark? She was already speaking louder, and her voice conveyed the approach of panic. Melanio squeezed her hand and said, Calm down, Jorgina, calm down. We'll fix everything. It's only temporary. I'll be by your side, don't worry. Melanio, what happened? Jorgina screamed in panic, already suspecting what was going on. You're blind. But it's temporary. Your eyes are perfectly fine, I'm sure. You don't remember the doctors examining you. You've regained consciousness several times already. Jorgina, don't be afraid, the doctors will find out what's wrong with you. We'll find the best doctors, and you'll see again. Everything will be as it was before. I promise you. Just don't panic. It's important to remain calm now. Each word from Melanio felt like a stone hitting Jorgina's heart. She felt such panic engulfing her that she thought she would die of terror right now. Everything that was happening seemed like a terrible nightmare, and she wanted to wake up immediately, but she couldn't. Jorgina started screaming. She tried to get out of bed, clutching the sheets, pushing her husband's hands away. She opened her eyes wide, but she couldn't see anything in front of her. It was such a dreadful sensation. She felt dizzy, but she couldn't say for sure because she couldn't see anything. She was just floundering on the bed, feeling disoriented. Suddenly, she felt nauseous, and she vomited right onto the bed. She choked on her own vomit and tears, continuing to scream in between bouts of nausea. It was horrible. She wanted to die at that moment, to experience relief and not feel so helpless anymore. She needs a sedative. Hold her hand, I'll administer it, said Melanio. Melanio held her, although it was quite difficult. Jorgina found a strength from somewhere that even an adult man couldn't handle. The doctor managed to give her the injection. Jorgina immediately felt weak. She continued to cry and thrash in her husband's arms, but her strength was diminishing. Before completely losing consciousness, Jorgina heard the voices of the doctor and her husband. She's in shock. She'll feel better soon. This is just the most intense initial reaction. She'll come to terms with it, you'll see. Everyone does when there's no other way, the doctor calmly said. But how? How is this possible? She didn't suffer much physical harm. How could she lose her sight so suddenly, from just one impact? Is it really possible? God, how are we going to live from now on? Melanio's voice was anxious and frightened. When Jorgina regained consciousness again, she was still under the influence of the sedative. She didn't have the strength to make sudden movements because she immediately felt nauseous. While she was unconscious, a nurse changed her bedding and replaced her nightgown. Jorgina sensed the foreign smell of some disinfectants. Melanio was by her side. Jorgina calmly asked him to tell her husband about the recent events. And he did. It turned out that Jorgina had been in the hospital for 2 weeks already. It was a shock to her. She thought she had been hit just a day or two ago, but oh, horror. She had been lying here for exactly 14 days. And she didn't remember those 14 days. She only remembered losing consciousness after being hit by the car. The scariest part was that there were no witnesses to the accident. No one saw how it happened, and no one knew how long she lay on the road. According to the doctor's estimates, she was laying unconscious for about 10 to 15 minutes until she was found. A man passing by called for an ambulance. Surprisingly, there were no serious injuries. She had just a few bruises, a broken elbow, and a cracked rib. But it seemed that she had suffered a strong blow to the head. Jorgina was examined, and a diagnosis was made, a moderate concussion. However, the consequences were unpredictable. She had lost her sight. And it wasn't due to any specific injury. Nothing serious was found. Something had happened that deprived Jorgina of the most essential human ability, the ability to see. Melanio held her hand as he recounted everything. Jorgina tried to remain calm. She knew her husband didn't like emotional outbursts. Judging by his composed voice, he wouldn't appreciate her tears or screams at this moment. The girl tightly squeezed his hand and pondered what to do next. She occasionally opened her eyes out of habit and turned towards her husband. But as soon as she realized that she had no vision, she immediately shut her eyelids tightly, trying to maintain her composure. When her husband told her everything, she tried to compose herself. What's next? Melanio said that they wouldn't keep her in the hospital anymore because there were no serious injuries and the danger had passed. But what about her vision, her eyes? Today, a doctor specializing in such injuries will come. I paid a lot of money for him to examine you and advise us. Don't worry. I hope he will tell us how to restore your vision. I believe you will be healthy again. It can't be otherwise, my dear. Jorgina hoped it would be true, otherwise, there would be no reason for her to live in this world. The professor conducted the consultation, but he didn't say anything encouraging. From his voice, Jorgina determined that he had nothing to delight them with. He reviewed the results of all the examinations, examined Jorgina, conducted his own checks and tests. And then, he didn't even bother to be discreet about it. If he had at least taken Melanio aside and told him privately, the girl would have had some hope. But he pronounced his verdict right in front of her. I'm sorry, but your situation is very unfortunate. You will undoubtedly live long and happily, or short and poorly. It depends only on you and your attitude. However, your vision will not return. Unfortunately, such injuries are quite common, and some have completely unpredictable effects on a person's body. I can confidently say that in your case, nothing can be done. Well, unless we remove your brain and replace it with a new one, but that, alas, is impossible. Medicine hasn't got that far. The professor considered his joke to be very funny, but his words only horrified Jorgina. I know what you're going to say. That you'll seek the best doctors, that you want to hear more opinions. It's your right, young people. But I can confidently tell you that any doctor will tell you the same thing I did. I advise you to accept everything as it is and continue living. Believe me, you will adapt to your new condition, dear lady. Everyone adapts, and you will too. I can assure you that many people lead even more fulfilling lives than before losing their sight. Only you can cope with this, and no one will help you except yourself and your husband, who will assist and support you. My advice to you is to convince yourself as soon as possible that you will remain blind forever, and start living by new rules. If you need it, I will give you several contacts of specially trained people who will help you adapt quickly to the new conditions. They will teach you how to navigate your home. Many people even move around on the streets by themselves, without assistance or guides. You are a young woman. Believe me, you can learn this. However, it may take several years. But now, you're not in a hurry, right? The professor laughed at his joke again, thinking it would lighten the mood up the atmosphere, while Melanio and Jorgina silently listened to the authoritative doctor who instantly robbed them of even the smallest hope of recovery. When the professor left, Jorgina couldn't hold back anymore. No, she didn't throw a tantrum, go crazy, or rage. She simply burst into bitter tears, causing tears to well up in the eyes of everyone who heard her cry. Jorgina mourned her shattered life, her happy future, her plans, and everything that had brought her joy in life. She could no longer see anything. She had become blind. Why should she live? She would now be disabled, a helpless coach potato. She won't be able to do anything anymore, neither cook, nor go to work in shops, nor put on makeup, nor smile at her husband while looking at his face. Damn, she won't be able to do anything now. Everything that used to bring her joy, the most ordinary things she didn't pay much attention to before, are now inaccessible to her. She will never be whole again. She will grow old and won't even know what she looks like. Her husband will see how she changes, and she won't even be able to take care of herself because she won't see the changes in her appearance. It's terrible, it's the real nightmare. No, she doesn't want to live like this. She would rather die than live like this. Jorgina spent a few more days in the hospital, and then the doctor who was monitoring her condition said that she no longer needed medical supervision. I understand that you're in a state of shock. But believe me, people adapt to everything, and you will adapt. And it's not as scary as it seems. You will adjust to your wife's unusual condition, and she will adapt too. You will be able to lead a fulfilling life. After all, she is not confined to a wheelchair. You just need specialists who will help her adapt quickly. And also, I would recommend psychological assistance. Jorgina is a very sensitive and emotional person. I'm sure a psychologist will help her cope with the overwhelming problem, and she will emerge from this depressive state without consequences, said the doctor to Melanio, who was silent and gloomy. Jorgina was discharged, and she returned home, although their apartment was now difficult to call a home for Jorgina. When you see familiar things, familiar walls, you immediately feel calm and peaceful. But Jorgina couldn't see anything. The home was a maze for her, where she had to wander in complete darkness day after day. In the first few days after returning home, Jorgina was afraid to move. She was grateful to Melanio for taking a week off work to help her adjust to the new condition. He decided not to hire specialists to assist his wife. He called a few of them and found out that such services were expensive and they could no longer afford extravagance. Jorgina wasn't working, and it was uncertain what the future would bring. Part of Melanio's savings were spent on his wife's recovery. Doctors, imported medications, some tests, calling in a professor, all of that required money. Now Melanio was the only one working. Jorgina needed some medication. They needed something to live on. Now everything fell on Melanio's shoulders, so he decided not to pay for the services of expensive specialists who would help his wife adapt. Melanio decided to handle it himself. For a week, he helped Jorgina get settled. He led her through the rooms, made her feel everything by touch. He taught her how to use the shower and the bathroom. He told her where everything was. He made her walk on her own. Jorgina put on a sleep mask and covered her eyes with it. She couldn't walk just like that, without the mask. Her eyes widened, and she tried to see something, anything. It was all in vain, but her attempts led to her eyes hurting intensely, followed by migraines that were difficult to alleviate. Jorgina remembered how she had always been curious about what people, who couldn't see, felt and why their eyes looked so strange, even though they hadn't suffered any injuries. She horrifyingly tried to recall why she had been interested in such things before. Now she experienced herself how bitter it is to be blind. Now she understood why these people always covered their eyes with a bandage or dark glasses. They simply felt more confident, she believed. At least, that's how she felt when she fastened the sleep mask over her eyes. She also remembered her strange dream that occurred a few days before the accident. There were children in an absolutely dark room and silence, and with a locked door. There were despair, fear, bitterness, and terror. She remembered those feelings too. Now she understood what that dream had meant for her. It was a warning. Would she have avoided this tragedy if she had interpreted that dream correctly? Who knows? Perhaps it was her fate, and nothing could be changed. Jorgina cried every night. Her husband comforted her as best he could, but by the end of the vacation week, he said, "Jorgina, stop tormenting yourself like this. I can't calm you down forever. I have to go back to work on Monday. I haven't been sleeping at night, startled by your sobbing. You're not letting me rest, nor yourself. We won't last like this for long. What's there to hold on to?" She responded to him, crying, "I'm going crazy, and you're telling me to calm down. How can I calm down when I'll never be the same again? I can't accept it." And Melanio continued to pity her. Time passed. Melanio returned to work. After several sleepless nights, he started sleeping in the living room. Jorgina was afraid that she and Melanio would drift apart completely. She was afraid that they would never be close again. She promised him that she wouldn't cry anymore. Melanio bought her some tranquilizing pills. They helped a little. He returned to the bedroom, and Jorgina started feeling better and even began sleeping through the night. 3 months after the incident, they made love for the first time. It was very strange for Jorgina. They had never done it in complete darkness before. But she tried to imagine that the lights had simply been turned off. They succeeded, but a strange feeling lingered within her, as if everything was not the same as before, as if Melanio's attitude towards her had somehow changed. She tried to dismiss these insane thoughts, but it was very difficult. As soon as Jorgina received disability status, she was fired from her job. Or rather, she was laid off, receiving 3 months' salary. Now Jorgina was officially unemployed, and she would never be able to work again. Nowhere and never. She would spend her entire life at home. She was no longer capable of anything. When she asked Melanio what they should do about buying an apartment, he replied in irritation, "Why are you talking about an apartment, Jorgina? Are you out of your mind? Why do we need a big apartment now? New living space means a new environment. How will you navigate in an unfamiliar space when you can barely move around in our own apartment? You won't even take a single step there. You'll have to spend about a year memorizing where everything is, and I don't have time for that. I need to work. I'm trying to make a living for us while you're sitting at home." Jorgina nearly choked with indignation. "Why do you speak like that? Am I to blame for what happened to me? Am I sitting at home by my own choice? I would gladly work 24 hours a day right now if I could. And you criticize me for doing nothing. Aren't you ashamed?" "I'm not ashamed because I didn't say anything reprehensible. I stated the facts as they are, and I didn't intend to offend you. I simply voiced the current situation. We can't afford to buy a new house right now. It's better to hold on to all the savings we have. Who knows what might happen? It's better to have some financial security. I didn't mean to insult or hurt you. Jorgina clenched her fists helplessly as she sat on the chair. How much she wanted to look into her husband's eyes, to see his gaze, to know what he was feeling. But it was impossible. She tried to compose herself, but she couldn't. She felt her night mask on her eyes becoming moist with tears. Jorgina whispered quietly, "And what about having a baby? We wanted it. We wanted to buy a flat with a room for the little one. Will we be able to find a place for the child in this apartment? There's only enough space for the two of us here." Silence hung in the air. Jorgina, at that moment, regretted not being able to see her husband's face. What was he thinking now? Where was he looking, at her or away? A child? Are you completely out of your mind? How can you talk about a child when you're blind? I don't understand. Are you mocking me or making fun of me? Fine, maybe you can manage a child somehow, that's understandable. But what's next? How will you take care of them? You're blind, Jorgina. You can't see anything if you've forgotten about that. You won't be able to do anything on your own. Maybe you'll be able to breastfeed the child, and that's if I bring them to you. But you simply won't be able to do anything else. And then what? Should I quit my job and stay home with the child while you're just happy that you fulfilled your duty? Why would I need all this? To give up on my own life, having a blind wife and a little child in my hands? You definitely need a psychiatrist, Jorgina. You have major issues in your head if you dare mention a child. Jorgina shivered from everything she heard. Melanio was so rude and angry when he said all these unpleasant things. Eventually, he left the kitchen. Jorgina heard the front door slam shut. He went somewhere without even saying when he'd be back, but Jorgina wasn't concerned about that right now. She tried to digest everything she had heard. So, her hopes for a complete family will never come true? She will never become a mother and will never be able to hold a child in her arms. It was all over. She had no reason to live. Her dreams were shattered. She sat at the table for a long time, holding the night mask she had taken off her eyes. She opened and closed her eyes. She no longer cried, her mask had already dried. She just sat there, motionless, immersed in her own darkness. Soon, Melanio returned. He approached his wife and sat next to her on the chair. "Jorgina, I'm sorry, I was too harsh, I said a lot of wrong things. I've thought it over and over, and I want to tell you that if you want." He didn't have time to finish because Jorgina interrupted him. "I'm sorry. I'm a fool. Apparently, my blindness has changed me a bit, but I won't behave like that anymore. I'll try to be wiser. I won't say stupid things or annoy you anymore. I don't want us to argue. You're the only person I can trust. I don't have anyone else to take care of me. I don't want to lose you. Thoughts about the baby are indeed crazy, and I'll forget about them right away. You're right, there can't be any talk of a baby. I completely agree with you. I promise I won't say such foolish things anymore, so please forgive me. Let's forget about everything." Melanio was initially surprised, but then smiled and said, "Yes, dear, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Let's not argue anymore. We're going through difficult times. If we argue, we'll only spoil our relationship, and I don't want that. I love you. We'll overcome all the difficulties, but we need to stick together. A baby will only hinder us, we won't be able to handle it in our current situation. I'm glad you realized that. It means your common sense is still there. Let's forget everything. I'm hungry. Do you want to eat? I'll come up with something now." Jorgina swallowed her tears and smiled, even though Melanio had already walked away from her. She tried to hold on, but it was getting harder for her. She hoped they would overcome the difficulties together, but it wasn't happening. A gulf of misunderstanding was forming between her and her husband, and Jorgina was afraid it wouldn't lead to anything good. And it happened just like that. From that day on, they started growing apart more and more. Well, in Jorgina's condition, it was impossible. She couldn't even go anywhere without someone accompanying her. But Melanio started behaving differently. He began staying late at work more often. Or maybe it wasn't just work. Jorgina couldn't find out anything. She felt very lonely at home. One day, she asked Melanio to teach her how to use the phone. Her husband thought for a long time about how to do it, and then he bought her a basic mobile phone with buttons. He programmed all the necessary numbers for her and showed her which button to press to call a specific person. She had too few close people left whom she could call. She asked Melanio to make sure he included her cousin's number. They only spoke once after the accident. Olivia offered her help, but Jorgina said everything was fine. Olivia hadn't called her since. Now Jorgina could call her husband anytime, and it became a little easier for her. She hung the phone around her neck on a special cord and started calling Melanio at work very often. At first, Melanio answered every time. But then he started getting annoyed that she was calling him too often. "Don't you understand that you're distracting me? Is that why I bought you a phone, so you could constantly bother me? Jorgina, for God's sake, stop bothering me, or I'll soon feel sick going home. Sometimes, I don't even want to come back anymore." When Jorgina heard these words, she became frightened. Could it be that her husband had fallen out of love with her? He had never spoken such things to her before. Her blindness was repelling him. She has already noticed that at night he moves away from her and turns away, and they no longer have heartfelt conversations. They hardly talk at all because Melanio was always absent from home. And when he come, he would say he is very tired. Jorgina stopped bothering him with constant calls. She only called when necessary or when he was significantly delayed at work. When she asked him questions about coming home late, Melanio would get angry and respond irritably. "And what did you expect? I have to work for both of us. Your disability benefits are a drop in the ocean. I'm delayed because I'm paid for extra work. Don't bother me with your questions. As if you don't understand how difficult it is for me." After that, Jorgina stopped asking questions. But after a week, Melanio didn't return home for so long that she became worried. She called him. He took a long time to answer. When he did, his voice sounded irritated again. "Yes. Why are you calling? I wanted to ask when you'll come home. It's already 9 o'clock. You've never been delayed this much before. Is everything okay?" She asked with concern. "Nothing happened, except that you distract me a lot. If something had happened, I would have called you. I'm fine. I'll be home around 10, Melanio sternly replied. Jorgina was almost relieved upon hearing his voice, but when Melanio ended the call, he didn't immediately disconnect his mobile phone. Jorgina clearly heard a quiet female laughter, and then the woman said, "Did she call again? Forget about her. Come here." And the phone turned off. Jorgina clenched her cell phone tightly. There's a woman next to him. What does this mean? Isn't he at work? And right then, Jorgina admitted to herself that she knows perfectly well where Melanio is now. He's not at work at all. Most likely, he has been deceiving her for a long time, and he has another woman with whom he spends all his evenings. This woman has replaced her, Jorgina, and now her husband doesn't even want to return to his blind wife. Perhaps Jorgina looks terrible, and he's already disgusted with her touch. He found a young and beautiful girl who comforted him and pitied him. Jorgina barely waited for Melanio to come home. Right from the doorstep, she expressed her grievances to him. She expected anything but such cold indifference. I don't understand what complaints you have against me. What's wrong with you? What's wrong? You must be joking. You're probably cheating on me, and I have to suffer thinking about it. Who was that woman? Your partner, a colleague at work? Tell me. Jorgina said loudly. Oh, so that's what you're talking about? Are you sure you want to know everything? Well, fine. I don't want to hide anything from you. I have nothing to be ashamed of. Yes, I have a lover. I spend time with another woman. And I believe it's necessary for me. At home, I have a blind wife who can't even feed me, take care of me, or show me any affection properly. Do you think it's easy for me? I already think I've endured for a long time, but it's just impossible. I can't bury myself alive. I can't devote my life solely to taking care of you. I'm sick and tired of all this. Life didn't prepare me for this. Coming home and relaxing, seeing a beautiful, well-groomed wife, enjoying a delicious dinner, instead of all this. I come home, and I have to take care of you, feed you, assist you in the shower. If you only knew how you look from the outside. Gray hairs showing, neglected eyebrows, pale complexion, no manicure. It's simply horrifying. You don't evoke any desire in me to touch you. That's why I have to go to a woman after work who takes care of me and makes me feel alive again. Jorgina felt a wave of anger and outrage. What is happening here? How could he cheat on his living wife and not even try to hide it to spare her feelings? Why is he doing this? To hurt her? But she won't allow it. How dare you treat me like this? What right do you have to behave this way? I'm speechless. You have no right to hurt me, deceive me, and openly talk about it as if on purpose. I won't let you mock me. And then Melanio laughed, and his laughter was so unpleasant that Jorgina shivered. And what can you do? Will you kick me out? Well, try. Just know that you won't succeed. I won't leave. This apartment isn't just yours. I will continue to live here, and I will do as I please. And you won't be able to stop me. Who do you think you are? Just a blind woman who is nothing without me. You completely depend on me. Without me, you can't even step outside this apartment. If something doesn't suit you, then leave yourself. I don't hold you back at all. But let me tell you, dear, how far will you go? That's right. You will sit at home and wait for me to come back from work. And I will come when I want to. I will feed you, bathe you, wash your disheveled head, shave your legs, cook, and clean. And you will silently smile and thank me. Is that clear to you? And if you dare to complain about anything again, you will regret it. You will sit hungry for a week. Or I'll leave you alone for several nights so that you feel so lonely that you'll want to howl in anguish. No, Jorgina whispered quietly. What did you say? Melanio frowned when he heard her dare to interrupt him. I said, no. I don't want this. I won't accept that you're sleeping with another woman. I don't want to live like this. It doesn't suit me. So what if I'm blind? I'm your wife. Do you hear me? Or have you forgotten that? Some absurd accident took away my sight, but my body, my brain, and my mind remain the same. I just can't see. I'm trying to learn everything to relieve your burden, but I need time and your support. And how can you provide me with that support if you're constantly absent from home? No, I won't tolerate your infidelity. Jorgina's voice was rather quiet but firm. Melanio looked at her with bewilderment. How dare she speak to him like that? She's just an empty space. Oh, really? You're not okay with this? Well, then hit the road. Leave, I don't hold you back, and I have no intention of keeping you. Why are you silent? You can pack your things and leave. The door is open, my dear. Jorgina stood still. After a minute, she said, Fine. I won't be here tomorrow. She cautiously felt her way out of the kitchen and headed to the bedroom. She sat on the bed and froze. She felt so defenseless that words couldn't even describe it. There were no tears because she didn't even want to cry. She simply wanted to disappear, sink into the ground, vanish without a trace, so that no one would ever remember her. Where should she go? She said that she wouldn't be here tomorrow. But where could she go if she couldn't leave the house on her own? Why did she say that? because she couldn't bear being here anymore. She felt unwanted by Melanio. He openly told her that, without any shame. Apparently, since she was blind, he didn't care about her. She couldn't look him in the eye with a condemning gaze that would have shamed him. Besides, if she hadn't lost her vision, such a situation wouldn't have happened in the first place. They would have continued living peacefully with Melanio. They would have bought another apartment, had children. But that would never happen now. So what should she do now? Jorgina heard Melanio taking a shower. And then she thought about someone who could help her. She groped for the phone hanging around her neck and tightly gripped it in her hand. And then, by touch, she pressed the button to call someone. She pressed the phone to her ear. For a few seconds, she strained to listen. What if the person was already asleep and didn't answer her? But then she heard a slightly sleepy voice. "Hello, I'm listening." "Hello, Olivia, it's me, Jorgina." "Jorgina? Is that really you? Why are you calling so late? Did something happen? Oh God, is it Melanio?" "No, Melanio is fine." "Olivia, I need your help." "No, I'm not dying. I just need your help." "I'm sorry, I have no one else to call." Of course, what's the matter?" "I'll help you in any way I can." "Tell me, what do you need?" She paused, contemplating what she wanted to say. But she wouldn't know if Olivia would agree or refuse unless she asked her. "Olivia, can you pick me up from here? I need to leave Melanio as soon as possible. I'll tell you everything when you come. I have nowhere to go. I don't know what to do. I have no one else to turn to. I'm sorry for calling you so late. I'm just confused. I don't know what to do. When should I come? Is it urgent? I can take a train tomorrow morning. I'll be there around 12 o'clock. Will that be okay?" "Okay, great. I'll come, don't worry. I'm on vacation right now. You're not causing me any trouble, so don't worry." When Jorgina set the mobile phone aside, she sighed with relief and placed her hand on her heart, trying to calm its frantic beating. Everything would be fine. Olivia would pick her up tomorrow. Melanio would be at work, and they could gather their things and leave calmly. She didn't want to return here anymore. She just needed to take all her documents, her bank card. She had a bank account in her name with money from selling her parents' apartment. She had money, so everything would be fine. 10 minutes later, Melanio walked into the bedroom. He snickered arrogantly, implying that he considered all her talk meaningless. He was confident that she wouldn't go anywhere. She couldn't take a step without him. She was like a blind, helpless kitten. "I will sleep in the living room. I'll wait a few days until you calm down and get rid of these crazy thoughts of leaving. And when you apologize to me for your behavior and come to terms with the fact that I have another woman, I'll be tender and friendly with you again, and everything will be fine. I'm going to bed." Melanio took his pillow, grabbed a blanket, and left. Jorgina silently listened to his speech and didn't say anything in response. She simply clenched her fingers so tightly that it hurt. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Even if she remains blind forever, she will never allow anyone to treat her like that. Yes, she is blind, but she is not an object. She is a human being, a woman, and she continues to feel and love, but she is also capable of hatred. Throughout the night, Jorgina sorted through her clothes in the closet, trying to determine by touch what each item was. By 3 a.m., she had gathered the things she would take with her. When Olivia arrives, she will help her get a suitcase. They will take the documents, and Jorgina will leave this apartment where she was once so happy but now wanted to escape from. The next day, Olivia arrived around 1 p.m. She hugged her sister but didn't ask her about what had happened. Olivia helped her pack her things into the suitcase. She found all the documents that Jorgina listed and put them in a separate folder, placing it in the suitcase. After thinking for a moment, Jorgina asked her, "What do you think? Can I take all my jewelry, or should I leave them for him?" Olivia frowned and firmly replied, "I'm not yet aware of what has happened between you two. But judging by everything, things aren't going well. However, I believe that you can take whatever you deem necessary, and no one will judge you for it." Jorgina sighed and asked her sister, "Then take the jewelry box from the closet. It probably won't fit in the suitcase, so just pour them somewhere." When they were fully packed, Olivia helped Jorgina put on sneakers and handed her sunglasses. The girls stood in the hallway for a moment, and then Jorgina said quietly but firmly, "Let's leave as soon as possible. I can't stay here anymore." They left. Olivia called a taxi, and they headed to the train station. Olivia bought 2 tickets to her city. The train was leaving in 2 hours. During that time, the girls sat on a bench in the station square, and Jorgina told her story. Throughout this time, Olivia wiped away tears several times. She felt so sorry for her sister, who had to endure so much. And she wholeheartedly wanted to help her. She didn't regret coming. This girl needed someone who could pull her out of all this mess and teach her how to survive in a world where disabled individuals don't always receive help and support. Olivia intended to become that person. She didn't plan to spend her entire life assisting Jorgina and being her loyal helper. She wanted to teach Jorgina how to handle things on her own, ordinary things that don't pose a problem for sighted people. That's how they started living together. Olivia had a 2-bedroom apartment. She was married to a very wealthy man. She also got married early and out of love. But their romance quickly ended. The marriage lasted only 3 years, and then they divorced, and her husband bought her a 2-bedroom apartment, agreeing with her that she would not claim anything else. Thankfully, they didn't have any children. Olivia's vacation had just begun, and she had 3 weeks of rest ahead of her. From the next day after Olivia's arrival, she got down to business. Jorgina was puzzled. She intended to suffer a little, lamenting her fate and failed married life, but Olivia didn't allow her to do so. "If you expect to lie in bed all day long, you're mistaken. Yes, I regret that you became blind, but you have to understand that either you become strong and continue your life with new rules, or you simply become an old hag who curses everyone. I pitied you, but I'm not going to pity you anymore. I have 3 weeks to teach you to be somewhat independent, and I demand that you pull yourself together and work diligently." Instead of lying on the bed all covered in tears, Olivia proclaimed her speech. And Jorgina understood that she needed to live by the rules set by her sister. She took her in, so it would be better not to anger or disappoint her. And both of them were determined to get to work. On the first night spent at Olivia's place, Jorgina had a strange dream, similar to the one she had before the accident. She was locked in a dark room again. She wandered in the darkness, bumping into walls. She found that door again, pulled the handle, and once again, the door was locked. But then she heard some rustling sound from below. She squatted down and started feeling the floor with her hands. And she found a small key. Could it be the key to that door? She stood up again, found the door and the keyhole. She inserted the key there, and the door opened. She saw such bright light that she had to cover her eyes with her hand. The last thing she saw before waking up was a dark-haired, dark-eyed man reaching out to her. The next morning, the girls got down to business. At first, Olivia led her around the house for several days, from morning till evening, with breaks only for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. By evening, Jorgina was exhausted, but by the end of the 3rd day, she had a mental picture of the layout of all the rooms and every item in any part of the apartment. Olivia taught her step by step to determine her location, and now Jorgina measured everything with her steps. She no longer bumped into walls. Another day, Olivia taught her how to use the shower and toilet, how to brush her teeth, and wash her own hair. She showed her where the hairdryer was and how to turn it on. It took 3 more days to teach Jorgina how to navigate the kitchen. The kitchen itself was half the size of theirs with Melanio. And Jorgina quickly memorized where everything was. Olivia taught her how to use the microwave, showed her how to heat up food, pour water into the kettle, and wash dishes. Now Jorgina could feed herself and even clean up after eating. Over the course of 2 weeks, Olivia taught her sister things that Melanio couldn't. Her husband simply took care of her responsibilities without teaching her to manage on her own. But Olivia approached it differently. She made her sister understand that she was not helpless and could comfortably stay at home without getting bored. Jorgina learned to use a vacuum cleaner, mop floors, and dust surfaces. She kept herself busy and no longer sat idle. It made her feel so good, as if she had finally come alive after a long time. Olivia saved the most challenging task for the last week. When she shared her plan with her sister, Jorgina mustered the courage to object for the first time. "No, I don't want to. It's out of the question. Do you want me to die of fear right here?" No, I can't do it," she cried out, feeling her helplessness. "But Jorgina, you understand that it can't go on like this for the rest of your life. You have to come to terms with the fact that I won't always be by your side. And you must overcome your fear. You know how it goes. Haven't you seen it in movies even once?" Olivia calmly continued to persuade her. "That's how it happens in movies. It seems so easy there. But this is real life. It's completely different. I won't be able to do it, Olivia, really, I won't," Jorgina insisted. "How do you know if you haven't even tried? Try it out, practice for a week, and then you can tell me if you can't do it. I'm not asking you for the impossible. I'm simply asking you to give it a try. What if you can? What if you end up enjoying it?" Olivia pleaded with her sister all evening. However, Jorgina remained adamant. Just when Olivia was ready to give up and admit that she couldn't win over Jorgina, the girl suddenly agreed. "Fine, okay. I'll give it a try. But promise me that if, after a week, I tell you I don't want to continue, you won't force me," she said. "All right, I promise," Olivia exclaimed happily. But she was confident that it wouldn't come to that. The next morning, Olivia and Jorgina went outside, and Olivia began teaching her sister to walk independently. They had a fenced yard, so Olivia wasn't afraid that Jorgina would wander off and get lost. For several days, they walked hand in hand from morning until evening. Olivia chose one route, and Jorgina counted the steps to determine where they could turn. She navigated using the curbs, figuring out which direction to go. It was very challenging but incredibly exhilarating. Olivia showed her the location of a few benches. By the end of the week, Jorgina was already able to walk on her own, and it was a triumph. As they were getting ready to sleep on Saturday and wished each other a good night, Jorgina peeked in again. "Sorry to bother you. Are you sleeping?" "No, go ahead. Do you need something? Do you have a headache?" No, everything is fine. I just wanted to tell you, Olivia, I don't know how to express my feelings, but you've done so much for me that I can never thank you enough for the rest of my life. You're my savior. I'm so grateful to you for your help. You've revived me in these 3 weeks. I've learned so much now. They may seem like simple things, but they mean so much to me. And I want to continue going out. I love walking, breathing the fresh air, and I'm so glad you pulled me out. I'm sorry I doubted it." Olivia even teared up. Jorgina spoke so touchingly that it was impossible to remain indifferent to her words. Olivia hugged Jorgina and whispered in her ear, onward and upward. "I'll teach you everything and then set you free." Jorgina decided not to inquire about the meaning of those words and leave it for later. 3 months passed. Jorgina went out alone every day but didn't wander too far. A couple of times a week, she went out in the evenings with her sister. She could even walk around the entire yard without Olivia holding her hand. Olivia simply walked beside her, occasionally giving her instructions and pointing her in the right direction. But one day, a major unpleasant incident occurred. Jorgina was descending the steps to go out for a walk. There was just one step left when her foot stumbled on a small stone, causing it to bounce aside. Jorgina lost her balance and fell on the ground. As soon as her head hit the road, she thought she saw a blue flash before her eyes. It resembled the sky. Then everything disappeared, and Jorgina lost consciousness. She woke up in the hospital. She immediately realized it because she smelled the familiar scent of disinfectants. Someone was holding her hand. Jorgina wanted to turn her head instinctively but couldn't move her neck. Oh God, she had fallen and become paralyzed? What an horror! Not only blind but unable to move now. No, anything but this. It felt like a nightmare. Why did this happen to her? What's wrong with her? She's breathing strangely, Jorgina heard Olivia's voice. I think she's in a panic. Nothing to worry about. We'll give her a sedative now, replied an unfamiliar male voice. No, I don't need a sedative. Please, don't inject me. First, tell me, how serious is it? I won't be able to walk anymore, right? Is that so? Just don't lie to me. What are you thinking, Jorgina? Are you in your right mind? Doctor, is she okay? Olivia was worried. Oh, yes. She's perfectly fine. She just thinks she's paralyzed, right, Jorgina? I'm telling you, don't worry, everything is fine, said the doctor. His voice was so extraordinary, as if she was enveloped in a mist of warm dewdrops. They seemed to leave traces on her skin, causing her to shiver. What's your name? Jorgina asked calmly. My name is Ignacio Blanco. If you want, you can just call me Ignacio. I won't be offended. And you're not paralyzed. You simply hit your head and strained your neck, so as a precaution, we decided to immobilize your cervical spine. You have a special medical device on you that restricts head movement. You can move your arms or legs if you don't believe me. Yes, indeed, she could move all of her limbs. Phew, thank goodness. That's the last thing she needed. Oh, thank goodness. I thought it was all over. And when I saw that blue flash in my eyes when I fell, I thought I wouldn't get up again. It was terrifying. Then Ignacio asked Olivia with a concerned voice. You said she's completely blind. Isn't that right? Instead of Olivia, Jorgina replied. Yes, I am completely blind. I had a major incident that caused me to lose my vision. Ignacio took her hand, and Jorgina felt a tingling sensation from his touch. Jorgina, what did the doctors tell you? Did you see any specialists? Tell me the opinions of all the doctors who examined you, or at least those you remember. Why bother remembering them? There was only one professor and hospital doctors. And they all said the same thing, I will never be able to see again. I wasn't referred to anyone else, Jorgina replied. Ignacio said anxiously. Jorgina, I would like to conduct some examinations. It's not just about your vision, I'm more concerned about your neck and spine. Furthermore, I want to say something. If your blindness were permanent, you wouldn't have seen that blue flash you described to me. The loss of vision may not be related to the head injury, it could be due to an entirely different reason. And I want to make sure of everything myself if you let me. Jorgina agreed. Over the course of a month, Ignacio conducted numerous examinations not only regarding her vision but also her skeletal and muscular systems. She had already been discharged, but Olivia accompanied her for checkups and consultations. Several neurologists, a psychiatrist, a manual therapist, and 3 massage therapists examined her. Finally, another neurosurgeon examined her. Then Ignacio delivered his verdict. Jorgina, I can tell you with almost 100% certainty that it may be possible to restore your vision. The examinations we conducted revealed that one nerve was compressed, resulting in these consequences. If you agree to undergo one surgery, most likely you will regain your sight. Jorgina burst into tears. Ignacio took her hand, and once again, she felt the tingling sensation on her skin. Why did his touch affect her like that? Jorgina quickly calmed down because the doctor's voice enveloped her from all sides, making her feel safe. Ignacio spoke at length, persuading her to give it a try because she had nothing to lose. They spent a whole month examining her, dissecting and analyzing her case. Ignacio had many conversations with Jorgina, gathering a detailed medical history. He didn't realize that he had started treating her not just as a patient. This beautiful, lively, vibrant, and emotional girl evoked feelings in him that he had buried long ago. He thought he was no longer capable of love. But Jorgina made him feel like a man. And he was eager to help her regain her vision and a normal life. In the end, Jorgina agreed to the surgery. What did she have to lose? Either she would remain blind, or her vision would be restored. She didn't want to consider any other possibilities. They decided that the operation would take place in 3 days. They were sitting in his office discussing the final preparations. The next day, Jorgina would be admitted to the hospital. When Ignacio stood up to escort her to the door, Jorgina suddenly placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "Can I do something? I've always been curious since I've seen it in movies. I want to know what blind people feel when they do this. Can I?" Ignacio didn't know what she meant, but he agreed without question. And then Jorgina reached out her hand and touched his face. She touched his forehead, eyebrows, eyes, cheeks, lips, and chin. Then she ran her hand through his hair and smiled. Usually, after something like this, people say, "You're handsome," or "Now I know what you look like." But, unfortunately, I didn't understand anything. I just know that you have very smooth skin and no beard. Thank you. I'm sorry, she said. Ignacio smiled and said softly, "I'm sure you will be able to see me soon. Hopefully, you won't say that I'm ugly and you don't like me." "No, I won't say that. If I can see again, I will thank you for bringing me back to life. Will you be present during the surgery?" "Of course, yes, I will be there." 3 days later, Jorgina was being wheeled into the operating room. She was very nervous, trying to calm herself down, but it was difficult. She tried not to cry. Before entering the operating room, Ignacio took her hand and, leaning closer, whispered to her, "I wanted to say this after the surgery, but I can't hold it back. I don't engage in close relationships with patients, but soon you won't be one anymore. When everything is behind us, would you like to have dinner with me?" Jorgina chuckled nervously. "I can't promise that. I need to see you first. What if you're ugly?" Ignacio laughed and let go of her hand. Jorgina was already in the operating room, thinking about something completely different than what she had intended to say. She was scared. She wanted to say that she would gladly have dinner with him, even if she couldn't see him. Jorgina woke up with a terrible headache. She groaned, and a nurse immediately approached her. "Does it hurt? Are you feeling unwell?" "My head is aching," Jorgina whispered quietly. The nurse quickly gave her an injection. After 15 minutes, the headache subsided. The surgery was successful, and now the doctors would come to see the results of their work. Jorgina had already regained consciousness. She couldn't move, but she didn't have the strength anyway. She felt strong weakness and excitement. What awaited her? There was a bandage over her eyes, and it would soon be removed. Oh God, it was so terrifying. 2 hours later, everyone was ready. The nurse removed the bandage from the patient's eyes. "You can open your eyes." "Just slowly," Ignacio said. And Jorgina slowly opened her eyes. Oh God! She could see again. It was unbelievable. Even the dim light made her uncomfortable, but she could see. She sobbed and looked around, blinking and squinting constantly. "Oh my God, I can see," she murmured. A doctor examined her for a few minutes. Then he said that everything would be fine, there was no more danger. The doctor continued speaking, but she couldn't hear anymore. Only one thought pulsated in her mind: she could see. She was no longer blind. She became normal again. She was no longer disabled. And Jorgina closed her eyes, afraid of bursting into tears. She felt someone grab her hand. The goosebumps on her skin made her realize it was Ignacio. She slowly opened her eyes. Jorgina looked at the person who, so to speak, saved her, and her heart started racing. She knew him. She had seen him in her dreams. He was the same man who reached out to her in her dreams when she opened the door in the dark room. It was him, her savior. "Hello." Ignacio smiled at her. Jorgina squeezed his hand. "Hello," Jorgina smiled back. "Well, how are you feeling?" Jorgina felt a tear run down her cheek. "Wonderful. It can't get any better. It's like I was born again. So, when do we go for dinner?" Ignacio pretended to frown. "We'll talk about that later. We have plenty of time. But you're still my patient, so let's not discuss that now." Jorgina stroked his hand. She hoped they really would have plenty of time because there was so much she wanted to tell him. "Are you sure you want this?" Jorgina looked at Ignacio and caressed his cheek. "Yes, I'm sure. It's time to leave the past behind. I've been carrying it for so long. I want to be with you, I want to marry you, but it's not possible until I get divorced. But I need to talk to him. I need to see him. I have to thank him for pushing me away. Because if that hadn't happened, I would have never met you. And I would still be blind," she said. 3 years had passed since the surgery. Jorgina and Ignacio had been living together for a long time. They had fallen in love with each other, and the young woman was happy. Her health was in order. Her vision had fully returned. The only thing that darkened her happy life was that she was still legally married to Melanio. It was time to finally throw away the unnecessary things. He hadn't called or written once in the past 3 years. He showed no interest in where she was, how she was, if she was alive. And Jorgina wanted to pay him a visit to settle everything once and for all. She returned to her hometown, where she hadn't been for over 3 years. She happily discovered that she felt no trembling or regret. She made the right choice by leaving because she had found true happiness and love. When Jorgina arrived at the apartment building where she lived with Melanio, she felt a sense of unease. What awaited her? How would he react to her recovery? Would he be glad or upset? Although she didn't care. Jorgina paid the taxi driver and got out of the car. After standing still for a few minutes, she slowly approached the entrance. As she climbed the stairs to the door, her skin tingled. She froze and then turned slowly to look at the cars parked in front of the entrance. Her gaze stopped at the yellow Jaguar. When she saw that car, she felt a pulsation in her head. She had seen this car before. But where? A strange feeling, as if she was missing something important, some detail. Stop. It can't be. It's the same car that hit her on that deserted street. It's him. Unbelievable. Jorgina was 100% sure because she saw the sticker on the window, a woman behind the wheel. She remembered seeing the same sticker on that car. Oh God, could it really be that car? Jorgina turned pale. She felt her palms damp with sweat. She had come to rid herself of the past, but it seemed that the past was haunting her. Jorgina took a step back, then abruptly turned around and climbed the stairs. She needed to get rid of all thoughts. She didn't even want to think about the fact that this woman was somewhere nearby. She had to go up to Melanio urgently, sort things out, and then leave for Ignacio's. When Melanio opened the door, he was stunned. He never expected to see his wife on the doorstep. Jorgina looked at him and then said, "Well, hello, my dear husband. Are you surprised?" "Jorgina? How? What? Has your vision returned? How is that possible?" Melanio was in shock. But Jorgina smirked and said, "Anything is possible, you just didn't believe it." Honestly, I didn't either. But I met people who made me believe, who helped me. And voila, I'm able to see again. So, are you going to let me into our apartment, or do I need to come with a lawyer? With a lawyer? What do you mean? Why a lawyer? Melanio asked. Jorgina pushed him aside and entered the apartment. And she immediately noticed signs of another woman's presence: women's shoes, cosmetics in the hallway, bags, perfume. A new mistress had already settled in. Well, Melanio wasted no time. I wonder if it's the same woman or is it someone else already? I see that everything is in order with you. Well, I regret that I have to ruin your idle life. I came to tell you that I'm filing for divorce, Jorgina said. Melanio turned pale and looked towards the bedroom. Fear and concern were visible in his eyes. She realized that his lover was also here. Well, she would meet her soon enough. Darling, who's there? Is it the grocery delivery? A voice came from the bedroom. Jorgina frowned. What an unpleasant voice his lover had. She sounded like creaky floor. She raised an eyebrow and whispered to Melanio. Maybe you'll introduce us? Does she know about my existence, or did you tell her I'm dead? Or are you lying to her, saying that we've been divorced for a long time? And then a woman in a robe came out into the hallway. She was petite and plump with red hair. Oddly enough, Melanio always liked slim, tall girls. This woman didn't match his idea of beauty. Jorgina scrutinized the woman. It seemed to her that she had seen her before, but she couldn't remember where they had crossed paths. She frowned, staring at her face, and the woman crossed her arms over her chest and looked at her provocatively. Who are you? Clearly, not the grocery delivery, she said with her unpleasant voice. And you're clearly not the housekeeper. I'm Melanio's wife. And you're his mistress, right? Jorgina replied. The woman looked at Melanio. Darling, you said she was blind. Have you been deceiving me? Carmelita, I didn't deceive you. She really was blind. I don't understand. I don't know how this happened. Carmela, it's not my doing, Melanio said, clearly groveling before his Carmelita. They deserved each other. I don't know why you came here, but you're not welcome here. You're no longer Melanio's wife, right? You left him yourself, and now I'm the mistress here. The woman looked at her angrily, but Jorgina didn't lose her composure. No, actually, I am still the mistress here, albeit half of it. But I came to fix that. Melanio, I'm filing for divorce. And we'll split this apartment in half. I think I have nothing else to do here. I've said everything. Jorgina turned and walked towards the door, and then her gaze fell on a table near the entrance. She saw a car alarm keychain. It was bright yellow with a jaguar emblem. Jorgina felt a shiver run down her spine. Suddenly, she realized something. She turned to the woman and asked, Is that your car parked outside? The yellow Jaguar. Carmela smirked and replied, Well, let's say it is. Why do you care? Do you want a similar car? You won't find it. There's no more car with that color. It was custom painted according to my individual order. And then Jorgina realized where she knew this woman from. It was her who hit her back then. She was the one who fled the scene. It was because of her that Jorgina lost her vision. It was all her. So, it was you who hit me? You're the monster. You left me unconscious on the road. I had to suffer because of you. And you lived peacefully, escaping punishment for what you did. Carmela turned pale and covered her mouth with her hand. Melanio didn't understand anything. He shifted his gaze from one woman to another. Carmela, what is she talking about? What does all this mean? Did you hit her? I don't understand what you're talking about. I've never hit anyone. She's lying, Carmela said to Jorgina. No. It was you. I saw you back then. Your hair and the sticker on the glass, I remember everything. I remembered you just now. I'll never forget your red hair. How despicable you are. You will answer for all of this in court. I'll do everything to make you pay for all my suffering. Carmela sobbed. Courage suddenly left her, and she looked very strange. She became a small frightened creature with wide eyes full of fear. Her face was flushed, just like her hair, and she didn't know what to say. "You will pay for everything you've done. Both of you," Jorgina said, and left the apartment, slamming the door. Jorgina divorced Melanio. She didn't file a lawsuit against Carmela. Melanio begged her on his knees not to do it. In return, he promised to give up his legal share of the apartment. Jorgina realized that he was willing to do anything for his lover. He didn't care that Carmela was responsible for their breakup. He only cared about keeping his lover out of court. Well, love can be blind. Jorgina didn't want to dig up that hornet's nest from the past. Now everything was fine for her, and she was happy. She just wanted to forget everything. After the divorce, the apartment was entirely at her disposal. She didn't know the future of her ex-husband and the woman who was responsible for her loss of vision. She wanted to forget them forever. It no longer mattered what happened before. Jorgina quickly sold the apartment because she set a low price. When the deal was made, everything was finalized, and she received the money. She immediately bought a ticket to return to Ignacio. As she was riding the train, she was smiling. She planned to give the remaining money from the sale of her parents' apartment to Olivia. Her cousin had done the impossible. She helped Jorgina start a new life and changed her destiny. Jorgina wanted to express her gratitude. She knew Olivia would refuse the money and wouldn't accept it, but Jorgina would come up with something. As for the money from selling the apartment with Melanio, she would leave it in her bank account. Let it stay there for now. She and Ignacio would get married, and then she would give birth to the child she was already carrying in her heart. Jorgina gently stroked her stomach and smiled even wider. One dream after another was coming true. And this was just the beginning.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.